Welcome to the Jewish World, the show that discusses the week's most pressing issues facing the Jewish state, the Jewish people, and the global Jewish community. This week, the World Council of Churches announced that it plans to withdraw its observers from Hebron in the West Bank due to harassment by Jewish residents. Their announcement followed Israel's decision to end the 22-year observer mission, the temporary international presence in Hebron, in which participants from several European countries, including Norway, Sweden, and Switzerland, participated. The observers were in Hebron to report on incidents of human rights abuses by Jewish residents in the city and the IDF against Palestinians. But just a few weeks ago, NGO Monitor released a report saying that the WCC observers taking part in the ecumenical accompaniment program in Palestine and Israel were promoting BDS and anti-Israel activities from within. So we have to ask, who is watching the watchers? Well, one group, right-wing NGO Im Tirtzu, has said that its operation, turning the cameras on the observers, is the reason they've decided to leave Hebron. Here with us to discuss this operation is Eitan Meir from Im Tirtzu. Eitan, how are you? Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, can you tell us a little bit about this operation?
Sure. It really starts a few months back during one of our tours to Hebron. Im Tirtzu runs a really large tours project to Hebron where we take university students, pre-army academies, and different groups in society to tour the city. Now, during one of these tours, we were just walking on the street, and all of a sudden we heard screaming and shouting. So we asked some of the soldiers what's going on, and they said, listen, we really have no idea what's happening. All of a sudden, some of the local Arabs just started screaming and shouting, and we see there's around 7 or 8 cameras from B'Tselem, an anti-Israel organization, and these Europeans that are trying to film us and hope that we do something. So we took a step back and we said, okay, we really have to look into this, and we realized that this is the EAPPI, which of course is funded by the World Council of Churches, which is of course funded by a variety of foreign governments. And we soon realized that this organization, although it claims to monitor and report on human rights abuses, what it really does is that it sends its members to Israel on tourist visas in order to harass Jewish residents and IDF soldiers. Now, these are people that actually get money to work in Israel, and I don't know any tourists that come to a country to film the security forces, but that's just me. In any case, these are people that come to Israel, and they go ahead and harass all the residents, IDF soldiers, and then when they go back home, they accuse Israel of a wide variety of things. Nice things like war crimes, apartheid, they promote BDS, they promote the Palestinian Arab right of return, all the things that you could think of, and that's exactly what they do. So we said, okay, what can we do? These are people that come to Israel to film IDF soldiers. We're going to turn the tables. We're going to film the filmers. So it's exactly what we started to do. So around already 3 months ago, we started to send people on a weekly basis, a couple times a week, to film them, to hold the cameras and say, here, these are the people that are harassing IDF soldiers, know who they are, and know what they do.
So you send members of Im Tirtzu to go out into Hebron and film these volunteers basically from the World Council of Churches program.
That's exactly right. When we started coming, they really didn't know what was going on because they're used to being behind the camera. They're not used to having people film them. And when we started to come, they slowly started to understand that we're actually exposing what they're doing. And Im Tirtzu has one of the largest Facebook followings in Israel. So the videos that we posted were viewed by hundreds of thousands of people. And when we first started filming, they were really acting like they owned the city, like they were sheriffs and no one could touch them. Then we started filming. They slowly started to cower away, to put their hoods on, to turn their backs. And then around 3 weeks ago, they stopped coming altogether. This was actually after 3 months of filming. And then last week, we heard the good news that they decided to leave. Now, this is not only a great achievement for Im Tirtzu, but also for the residents of Hebron, because like we were told after one of the residents there, they feel like they were in a zoo. You have all these foreign organizations like TIF and EPPI coming to film them, and like they're animals in a zoo, sticking their cameras in their faces when all these people want to do is live peacefully. So it was really a great day and a great week for the residents of Hebron and for the state of Israel.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so why do you think that your actions, sort of turning the cameras on them, ended up making them leave?
I mean, it's very simple. There's nothing more that these people hate, and when I say these people, I mean all the far-left activists that film and harass soldiers and the residents of the country. There's nothing more they hate than having their faces exposed. Because they like operating when they're anonymous. They like that no one knows who they are. But when all of a sudden their faces is pictured and viewed for hundreds of thousands of people on social media, then they don't really like that so much. And then again, we started to come in and we really saw a progression of them standing with their backs tall, walking around the city like they could do whatever they want, to them slowly cowering, hiding away, putting on their hoods, running away. Every time we started to come, as we started going along, they started to run away and they started to leave. So I mean, this was, and then you see in the World Council of Churches official announcement, they even said that it was due to this harassment that they left and that their accompaniers couldn't perform their duty. Of course, what they call harassment is what we call exposing what they're doing for the public to see. And what they did get right is that they weren't able to perform their duty because what they wanted to do was continue harassing the Jewish residents, continue harassing IDF soldiers. And our project, the Film the Filmers, basically said, no, we're not going to let you do that.
Great. Well, Eitan, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Great. The New England Patriots beat the Los Angeles Rams 13-3 in the Super Bowl in Atlanta on Sunday, winning the Football League championship for the 6th time. But the news that's caught our attention is that wide receiver Julian Edelman was named the most valuable player, making him the first Jewish player in history to achieve this feat. In the big game, which was one of the lowest scoring Super Bowls in history, Edelman had 10 receptions and ran 141 yards to help bring his team to victory.
Nah, I wasn't really thinking about that. I was just, my head was down and just trying to go out and try to win ball games and help the team. It's pretty surreal. And tough times don't last, tough people do. So I preach that, and I guess you gotta live to it.
Edelman, whose father is Jewish and mother is Christian, has said in interviews that he identifies as Jewish and celebrates Jewish holidays. He has shown his pride in his Jewish heritage on multiple occasions. In 2014, he wore a pin with an Israeli flag on it in a game. He has often talked about his faith on social media, and he even visited Israel in a trip he documented for his fans. And following the massacre at the Pittsburgh Tree of Life Synagogue, Edelman wore special cleats with the words Tree of Life written in Hebrew to honor the victims. Edelman isn't the only Jewish face in this year's Super Bowl. The New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft is a proud Jew and an outspoken supporter of Israel. He is also this year's recipient of the Genesis Prize Foundation Award, known as the Jewish Nobel. He won the $1 million award for his contributions to Israel and the Jewish people, and has said that he will donate the money to help combat anti-Semitism. This week, there were lots of developments in the Jewish communities of South America, from Brazil to Venezuela and also Argentina. Here with more information is ILTV's Joy Gavijon.
Hi, Lidar.
Hi, Joy. So, recently we heard about the anti-Semitic cartoon in a Brazilian newspaper that saw Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro embracing in the form of a swastika. And now there is another anti-Semitic cartoon coming out of Brazil.
Yes, that's right. As you can see, Carlos Latouf drew the moment when Israeli soldiers landed in Brazil and Bolsonaro was waiting to welcome them. Now there is a very obvious detail, that is that all the soldiers have blood on their hands. And in the dialogue in the cartoon, we can read that after Bolsonaro greets the soldiers, one of them answers, quote, "Sorry for our delay, we're busy killing Palestinians," end quote.
And this, of course, as a team of some 130 IDF soldiers came to Brazil to help with search and rescue operations in the collapse of the dam.
Yes, exactly. But this drawing did not go out without receiving criticism. Latouf is known for his anti-Israel views, and he has been harshly criticized for this cartoon. The honorary consul of Israel in Rio defined Latouf as a racist and an anti-Semite.
Well, we've seen warming ties between Israel and Brazil and the reception that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu received in Brazil, so this really is unfortunate.
Yes, it is, but as I said before, this didn't go without criticism, and even Uri Fink, an Israeli cartoonist, published a cartoon in response, and in this one, Fink shows an Israeli soldier trying to rescue a victim that is buried in mud, while Latouf himself is trying to stop him from helping. And in his Facebook, Fink expressed that Latouf represents a disgrace for their profession, and he wrote, quote, "It is acceptable to criticize the nation's policies, but even harshly, but when it sends people to help save lives in your country, the least you could do is shut up."
Well, let's hope Latouf receives some kind of disciplinary action for this cartoon.
Yes.
So let's move on now to Venezuela, where all eyes are on the country as support for leader of the opposition and head of the National Assembly, Juan Guaido, is growing.
Yes, so in Venezuela there was a massive march in support of Guaido, and of course this has support from around the world, including here in Israel, where Venezuelan immigrants gathered in Tel Aviv, Haifa and Jerusalem and Jerusalem wrapped up in Venezuelan flags to express their support for Guaidó and to thank Israel for recognizing him as the legitimate interim president of their country.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell us a little bit about the demonstration in Venezuela?
Yes, for sure. So the main one was in Caracas, and it was a massive demonstration. People seemed to be very optimistic this time, and they claimed to be very close to a change, and they thanked the international community, including Israel, for helping with this.
And how has Israel helped exactly?
Well, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu expressed his support for Guaidó, along with other countries like United States, Canada, France, Spain, and the European Union Parliament, and many other countries from South America.
Okay, so how does this play out exactly? These countries have expressed their support for Guaidó, and what about the other side? Who's expressed their support for Maduro?
Well, Cuba, Bolivia, and the Palestinian Authority, and also Iran, which isn't surprising because under Maduro, Iran and Venezuela had very close ties. They have all expressed their support for Maduro.
Okay, so the situation in Venezuela is continually evolving, and we're going to keep a close eye on it. Let's move now to Argentina. What's going on there?
Okay, so in Argentina, former President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, who was accused of conspiring with Iran to cover up the investigations into the 1994 attack of the Jewish Center in Buenos Aires that killed 85 people and left hundreds wounded, is supposedly considering running for the high office again, according to Reuters.
Okay, well, this is a very interesting development in Argentina and one that is just starting to develop. So, of course, we will cover this as new developments take place. Joy Gavijon, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Of course, Lida.
A new report released this week by the Institute for Jewish Policy Research and the Community Security Trust in the United Kingdom has found that the majority of non-Jewish people in the UK oppose BDS. In fact, according to the poll, only 10% of UK citizens support the boycott against Israel. This is surprising considering the rampant anti-Semitism and calls for boycott against Israel that surface from the UK on an almost daily basis. According to the poll, there is a clear correlation between BDS sentiments and anti-Semitism in the UK. The poll presented around 4,000 UK citizens with 10 anti-Semitic statements and found that 58% of respondents who believe that Israel is an apartheid state also believed in 5 of the anti-Semitic statements, while over half, around 52%, agreed with 6 of them. The poll also found that 46% of respondents did not believe in a boycott against Israel, while another 42% said that they had no opinion on the issue. But the problem is that even though only 10% support a boycott, they are a vocal anti-Israel force. The poll also found that respondents of the Muslim faith were around 4 times more likely to agree to a boycott of Israel, but even so, the majority of Muslims polled opposed a boycott. The key interesting fact that the report found was that there was a strong connection between BDS and anti-Semitism, so that the greater the anti-Jewish sentiment is, the more likely a person is to agree with the idea of boycotting Israel. Interestingly, however, saying that Israel is an apartheid state was less of a predictor of a person's anti-Semitism than supporting BDSs. This leads us to our next topic. Anti-Semitism in the UK is a hot topic in today's world, making headlines on an almost daily basis, as calls to boycott Israel and increasing anti-Jewish hostility have seemingly become the norm. Joining me today to discuss the rise of anti-Semitism in the UK is Dr. Natan Aridan from the Ben-Gurion Research Institute for the Study of Israel and Zionism. Welcome.
Welcome to me.
So first, I'd like to talk about this poll, which I found very interesting. It says that only 10% of UK citizens support BDS. What do you make of it?
Well, first of all, Israel doesn't have such a negative image as we think it does. The poll was conducted in 2016-17, so it hasn't actually included the last few months. But what actually has happened is that the poll has shown that a very high percentage of Jews fear that anti-Semitism is on the rise, and it's going steadily from year to year. But it hasn't affected to a great deal on the boycott of Israeli goods, etc.
And speaking of BDS, right? We saw another call from dozens of artists in the UK calling not to participate in the Eurovision Song Competition because it's set to take place in Israel. So BDS is very much alive and kicking in the UK.
BDS is alive and kicking. There are certain things that they do. They go into certain stores that sell Israeli products. But the fact of the matter is that they have failed to convince countries not to participate in the Eurovision. But what is important and hasn't been quantified is that the terrible stress many Jewish, but not only Jewish students face on campuses in Britain, but not just in Britain, even more so now in America, where aligning, speaking up on behalf of Israel, or even being sympathetic to Israel, is branched as being fascist, neo-colonialism, etc. And that, in the long term, is going to be very problematic.
So going back to the poll, it also found a strong link between BDS and anti-Semitism, something that the Jewish community has said a million times over. So let's talk a little bit about anti-Semitism in the UK. Why do you think it has grown so much in recent years?
First of all, anti-Semitism has always been there. It's not just in the Labour Party, but it's also current in other parties. I think partly it's to do with, a lot of it is connected with Israel. A lot of it is connected with the myth that the Jews control the media, that Israel controls the White House, etc., etc. And this is becoming more prominent as, unfortunately to say this, more where the polls suggest that British Muslims are 4 times or 5 times more likely to actually have what we consider to be anti-Semitic comments than the rest of the population. This is very worrying and of concern.
Okay. And you mentioned the Labour Party. You know, under Jeremy Corbyn, it's been accused of playing a major role in promoting anti-Semitism. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think it's promoting anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism was there with his predecessor, Miliband. But I think what's happened is that Corbyn understands that the Muslim voters in Britain are way by far, far more than Jewish voters, and panning to his own understanding of the world. For instance, he was a fan of the president of Venezuela. Well, we all know what's happening to Venezuela, and other things. So there are comments which have been tolerated in the Labour Party. Belatedly, he apologised, whatever, laying wreaths on Palestinian terrorist graves, etc., and being totally misunderstanding of Jewish fear. That is a problem which still has not allayed the fears of British Jewry.
And this is a man who could potentially become the next Prime Minister of the UK. So what does that say about the future?
Well, unfortunately, he could be Prime Minister of the party. It has affected, if you look at local elections in last year, the local elections, there was a swing against the Labour Party, and it was in a place where the constituency had 16% Jews. And that, I think, has an important effect. He's insensitive. I don't think he's anti-Semitic, but he's tolerant of anti-Semites, which should not be tolerated.
Now, we're seeing yet another report that came out this week from the Israel Strategic Affairs Ministry that has tied BDS organizations to terrorism. And the fact is that European governments, including the UK, are continuing to perhaps knowingly or unknowingly fund these organizations engaging in BDS activities. I'm curious to know what you think can be done to prevent this phenomenon as well.
I've read thoroughly the report. It is important to understand that there are people in Israel and outside who are critical of Israel. But I have never met anyone who's been very involved in BDS that doesn't stop just with Israel's policies on the West Bank. That it's very, very rare to find anyone who will agree to the Israel's borders before 1967. What can be done? This is very difficult because as far as certain countries in Europe, they regard criticism of the West Bank, they haven't done their homework thoroughly. This is scandalous. I don't think the British government will be tolerant of funds going to the IRA on Brexit or other things. So the important thing is to expose the EU and to expose them and to get them to explain why monies have been funded going to terrorists who are on the boards of these organizations.
Well, Dr. Al-Idan, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you.
And now on a positive note. Israeli Eurovision winner Netta Barzilai is making headlines around the world again with the release of her new song, Basa Sababa. It's her first single since winning the Eurovision last year. Basa Sababa is slang for that sucks, that's cool. Let's take a look at part of the clip. The video was filmed across Kiev in the Ukraine and shows Barzilai wearing a bright pink outfit and horns resembling a rhinoceros. In an interview with Reuters, Barzilai explained that the song is about her experience since she won the Eurovision contest, the love she's received from some and the hate she's received from others.
There was also, with popularity, there's a lot of love, but there's a lot of hate as well. And it was magically, I felt it like sliding off me. And I was thinking about something primal, something like a spirit animal that symbolizes all that. And I found the rhino, like, its skin is so thick, you know, and it's so strong. And, you know, it attacks its problems instead of running away from them. And, you know, its horn it's almost flipping you off, like, I don't care what you think about me.
In any case, she says the song is about empowerment, self-love, and self-acceptance. Well, that's all the time we have for this week's show. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us and all of you, our viewers, for tuning in. And we'd love to hear from you if you have any stories, whether about anti-Semitism, BDS, or any positive events going on in your Jewish community. You can reach out to us on Facebook at Israel English News, on Twitter at ILTV News, and on our website at iltv.tv. I'm Ladar Gravelazi. Thanks for watching.